Well, let's do it. Shall we do another?
Yeah.
Great.
This is the 8th and final episode of Out of the Dark, an audio series about Darke Hall, a theatre in Regina, Saskatchewan that opened in 1929, then opened again in 2002 after an extensive restoration. In this series, we have explored Darke Hall through the stories of people who have been touched by this historic performance space. To conclude this series, we are going to embark upon an audio tour of the restored Darke Hall. And I'm happy to note that I will be accompanied on this tour by some friends I've made in earlier episodes.
I remember when Hilda Allen phoned me after casting her.
I was
Furious that they cast her as Auntie Mame. And Hilda phoned me that night. She said, I know you're upset, Lynn, she said, but, I just couldn't think of anybody else for the role of Vera. So I hope you'll consider it. And I said, yes, I will, and I'm going to wipe the stage with her.
how nice.
But in fact, we were very good together, weren't we?
Oh, you were
Yes, and I
excellent
thought I would
together.
get Vera. That was the one that I really thought I would get. But I was very
hear you.
surprised. I was very surprised when I got named because I thought I might get Vera.
Before we go, if I could just get you guys to introduce yourself for On the Tape. So I'm here today with...
Marianne Woods.
Carol Gay-Bell.
Lynn Goldman.
And we'll be getting a tour from...
Dawn Bergstrom.
James Yoke.
Let's go.
So this is now the lobby. You may have remembered the old basement that had classrooms and things like that, but this is now the main lobby that everyone will come into when they come to an event. So the box office will be here,
Oh, there.
as well as coat check,
Nice.
and we have a bar over here. And James might want to share a little bit more about design and why they set it up the way they did.
Yeah, well, you can sense a little bit of the historical nature of the building starting to permeate down to this floor. It feels modern, and yet there are touches that make us think a little bit about older spaces, things like the wainscoting along the perimeter, some of the subway tiles.
I'm going to interrupt James there for a second to mention that I actually went on 2 tours of Darke Hall. There was this one with Marianne Woods, Carol Gay-Bell, and Lynn Goldman. Carol and Lynn were featured in episode 2, where they spoke about some of their experiences performing in Darke Hall, mainly through Regina Little Theatre, and specifically, they recounted their rivalry for the role of Mame in the play Mame. Marianne appeared in episode 3 and spoke about her experiences with Darke Hall, starting with music lessons as a child, through a high school performance of Guys and Dolls, and up to her time with Regina Lyric Musical Theatre and beyond. She also appeared in Mame with Lynn and Carol. Our guides for this tour were Dawn Bergstrom and James Yoke. Dawn is the Darke Hall curator, and I spoke with her in episode 5 about her time with the Children's Summer Theatre. James Yoke is a principal architect at P3 Architecture, who appeared in episode 1 to talk about the restoration project. But the other tour I did was with James Yoke, but also with Kate Jackson, who is, like James, from P3 Architecture, and was the lead architect on the Darke Hall restoration. That was more of a technical tour of the building, and I'm going to jump to that tour now, where James and Kate and I are standing in the lobby talking about the challenge of designing a new way to enter Darke Hall through the basement that would be fully accessible for everyone who enters the building. We'll catch up again with Marianne, Carol, Lynn, and Dawn a little later, when they're in the main floor foyer and about to enter the auditorium.
The building was completely inaccessible unless you came up. I don't even think there was a ramp at the back, actually. It was just inaccessible.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think there was.
No, there wasn't.
So you have to think that in this day and age, for a facility like this to be inaccessible to people and not inclusive, that's a real problem.
Yeah.
So the innovative thing about the Connexus building in this link was that because of the 13-meter height restriction for building in the park, the Connexus building couldn't exceed that, but you can't really get 3 stories of usable space within a 13-meter height. It's too
Right.
short.
Okay.
So by playing with the grade, that it's higher at the street level and everything falls to the park, it was readily apparent that for people to access this building, you need to come in at ground level at the parking lot side.
Right.
So because of that, the whole Connexus building was pushed into the landscape.
Yep.
So it's at grade at the back, but it's half a story down at the front. So that allowed them to build 3 stories. But the real driver behind that wasn't about getting them their space. It was about creating an accessible entrance and lobby for the Darke Hall project. And so now our whole entry sequence into Darke Hall has changed. You can park at the back or the front. You can come down the slope at the front or at grade at the back into the lobby space, and then you'll come into what used to be a very
Church basement.
Yes, it was a church basement for all intensive purposes, and hadn't been touched since the 1980s, I think, was when it had been renovated. And it looked like you could have been in the basement of the Pasco Hospital, you could have been in the basement anywhere.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do was transform this into the entry for Darke Hall. And it's now part of I think, a very dramatic sequence of moving you up in the building. It provides a bar, an accessible bar, new accessible washrooms that we'll show you, and we'll talk through it, but this now becomes sort of the initial crush space. The university and the operators can ticket at the doors to the link. They can ticket at the access to go upstairs. So this can actually act as not just the crush space, but it can connect to what's going on outside, and that can be used as a crush space. And the link can be used as a multi-purpose space for events, and when there's nothing going on in Darke Hall. This bar in this area can support what's going on out there, be it a meeting, be it presentations, be it a dinner, president's dinner or something like that. It seats about, and I forget my numbers, but was it 120 around tables, or was it 80 around tables?
It's around 100.
Around 100 around tables. So now you've got washrooms that'll support that. If the hall is full upstairs, you don't have all 400 people here. You can spill out into the lobby space. You can spill outside into the courtyard space. It just creates a new type of environment for Darke Hall. It's much more contemporary and relevant to how we experience performance facilities today.
Right. Now, the way you tell that story, you make it sound like this was a happy accident with like the 3 meters and having to have everything come in at grade. How does that realization occur for you guys as architects?
Why don't you answer that one?
Well, I'd say it's not like miraculous, which is probably how I saw design before I got into design myself.
Yeah.
It is investigating the parameters and crashing your head against it until you come up with something. And it's several iterations. I don't know how many times we drew a building to attach onto Darke Hall before we arrived at something.
Right.
A long time ago, we were talking about a link on that side. So we had done a bunch of investigations before we even got to the Connexus project. So we sort of knew what the issues were in terms of connecting into this building.
Yeah.
And the main thing is that Darke Hall itself, especially as we get up into the upper levels, the historic levels, is really, really tiny. It's super compact space, so trying to attach something into it without disrupting that beautiful heritage space is really difficult to do.
Right.
So actually, we found out the only elegant way to do that was to enter from the basement, because then you're not disrupting any of that space at all.
Right.
And even the aesthetic of the exterior too. I mean, you're right. If you go back to at least probably 15 years ago, there was a concept done for doing an addition to the college building that would connect to Darke Hall, and it was a very, I would say, it would have competed with Darke Hall in terms of its expression and size. So in many respects, what we've done here with the Connexus building and the link, and then how the west addition to College Avenue campus has occurred, is we've really done our best to allow Darke Hall to continue to stand on its own as a little heritage gem that makes up part of this heritage corridor that is College Avenue, this street wall. And that's why the Connexus building is pushed away, and the link drops down in height. It's actually below the height of the windows in the auditorium, which was a critical sort of horizon line or bench point for us. And then by standing proud on this side, the distance between the two buildings on the east side, between College Avenue, between the campus building and the West Addition and Darke Hall, is the same as the distance that we've created between the west side of Darke Hall and the Connexus building. Okay. So there's a feeling of sort of this rhythm, and it's sort of a subconscious thing that most people wouldn't recognize, but as architects we see as critical sort of organizing elements in the way of creating rhythm and height. Like the height of the Connexus building actually aligns with the height of, I think it's the towers on the front of Darke Hall here. It's very, very close to that. Okay. So there are sort of these reference points that we try to draw. If you think of overlaying a grid on the site plan and on the elevations, right, there are things that we're picking up. Even on the Connexus building, the dimension of the windows and the vertical mullions and these fins that you see, it's all derived from this this heritage architecture, not heroic, this heritage architecture, so that the idea of that rhythm and that scale is repeated. It becomes a little subconscious, I think, but it's there, and the longer you look at it, the more you see how everything starts to fit together, and it's all knit together quite carefully. Okay. So, do you want to lead the way?
Sure. Okay. Let's creep upstairs.
Yeah. All right.
There's a coat check / ticket office, box office that's created a multi-purpose space. Family washrooms and accessible space here.
This is the big secret.
Oh.
So we've jammed an elevator into this building.
Nice.
Which allows access to all floors in the public space.
Right.
So main floor and balcony. And this was literally the only place we could put it. There's a lot of working with the elevator consultant himself about like what walls can we get rid of in order to gain 4 inches, in order to get enough space that a wheelchair can make the turn into the elevator.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if you recall, we just came through the west stairwell. This stairwell didn't exist.
Oh, really?
It didn't come down to this floor.
Yeah, this was a storage room.
This was a storage room.
Oh, so this is all new?
This is all new.
That's all brand new construction.
Really? This looks great.
I think the really cool stuff about Heritage is when we peeled the floor back upstairs, they were anticipating this stair coming in at some point. Right. So they were anticipating us 100 years ago because the floor construction was different in this area.
Okay.
Everywhere else in the building, there's a concrete slab. This was wood-only construction for this portion. So the contractors had a nice surprise, and it was very easy to take out.
Right.
So you asked some questions about, what are the things you uncover when you start working on a building?
Yeah.
And I would say both with College Avenue campus and with this project, you start to uncover things that give you hints about the thought process, the design thought process 100 years ago. What were they thinking of? Well, they were actually thinking that the basement would become something that would be used more extensively, what we call the basement. It's really not the basement anymore, but it would be used more extensively than how it was being used. So it was, as Kate says, it's like, oh, wow, that's great. What we're really doing is following through on some ideas that somebody had 100 years ago. And there's actually a concept in it's more city planning than architecture, but it's called the third man. And it's the idea that somebody comes up with an idea and they build something, and then the next person comes along and they recognize that there's a big idea that somebody's trying to realize, so they build something that's sympathetic to it. And it's the third person in that has to recognize the efforts of the first two, and it's usually the third piece of the puzzle that goes in, and now everything is complete. And now the master plan for what had been intended for a site or for a building starts to become more and more apparent. And in some respects, we are that third person this time, because there was the original Punton design, Cliff Weens did an addition, and now we've come back in and we've peeled out some of the things that were done to the building that were maybe less sympathetic to the original intent, and we've really restored it back to being a temple for the arts, but we've actually, I would say, elevated it even further and made it into an event space that is much more in line with its original design and its original intent. So it applies not only in city planning, it can apply in architecture too. So come on
So the
upstairs.
other funny thing is you're standing on top of where there was an elevator shaft
That's right.
Oh,
put
really?
in the 1980s. Well,
Oh,
foundation for a while.
Foundation. They thought in the 80s they would blow all this stairwell out and put the elevator in here.
Okay.
But when you've got 400 people plus a balcony, it's pretty hard to move people around the building with only one tiny little stairwell.
Right.
And you asked about the tunnel.
Yeah.
That tunnel, let's go up the other stair.
Okay.
So, here's where the tunnel was.
Oh, no.
It was rather unsafe.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
partially filled in for the project that's going on adjacent,
Okay.
and had been largely abandoned, and all it was causing water issues in Darke Hall, so.
Right. So
And
how
that-
do you fill that in?
How do you fill it in?
Yeah.
Well, you basically kind of fill it with dirt and
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
So,
So it is like filled in all the way through. There's no like secret pockets that archaeologists will discover in 100 years?
that's a good
Well,
question.
portions of it are abandoned,
Okay.
But not filled, so there's still a tube.
There's a
in,
tunnel.
underneath the ground.
Yeah,
Right. Oh, that's awesome. That's just nice to think about.
yeah, like opening up a pyramid or something, right?
Yeah.
Somebody will chip the floor open now and, hey, there was a tunnel there and that connected through the next building and then down to where the heating plant used to be.
Okay.
We did a lot of research into the original Mawson plan and the original plans for how College Avenue laid out. There's a separate discussion, a separate story about the whole concepts behind the College Avenue campus, and again, reinstating some of those ideas that were intended when the buildings were first done, that over time were abandoned and totally forgotten about. So it's a little bit, this heritage work is a little bit like peeling an onion, not just from the physical building perspective, but also from understanding the history and the context.
You're listening to Out of the Dark, a series about Regina's historic performance space, Darke Hall, on 91.3 FM, CJTR, tuned into the community. At this point, we're going to jump from the new stairwell to the other side of the building, and James, Kate, and I are going to head up the old stairwell, which lands in the main floor foyer, which many people will remember as the original entryway and lobby.
So can you tell the difference between the stair on the other side and this one?
Yeah, this looks older. Little older.
A little narrower.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow.
You're
This
saying,
is
wow, now just
great.
wait.
Well, like I say, I've never been in this building before, so.
So all of the woodwork was completely restored.
Yeah.
It's the vast majority of the woodwork was existing. The doors were taken down and sent to shops to get fixed. The stained glass was all removed and redone. Everything, just like master craftsmen have fixed this place up.
Right.
But you want to talk about the doors, the middle doors?
Yeah, I think the really interesting piece here, perhaps you don't recognize this middle door that's here.
No.
Previously, there were two doors entering into the building pre-renovation. And when we were looking at old photos, we noticed that you could see there was a third door.
Right.
So when we opened up the plaster, we found a masonry arch that was ready for that third door.
So this was all built over top of?
Yeah.
This was
It
closed
hidden.
in.
Really?
Yeah. The door wasn't there though, unfortunately. We were hoping it would be.
Right.
But it was just a masonry arch. And this has all been recreated by local craftsmen to
Really?
recreate the doors you see on either side.
Brilliant. And the glasswork up there too? And
Yes,
Glasswork.
100% of it, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So remember, as we walk through this and you look at things like that, this building is now completely universally accessible,
Right.
right? So, but you wouldn't, it looks like it did 100 years ago. It doesn't look like it did 20 years ago. It looks like it did 100 years ago.
Nice.
You know, the light fixtures, some were, like you can see in the new stairwell, the light fixture there matches what's going on there. Some of them are new, some of them are existing, some of them are modern, some of them have been retrofit. So there's sort of a combination of things going on.
Right.
But overall, as we walk through, it'll give you a seamless feel of how the building comes together.
Well, yes, we had a really fun time sourcing heritage glass to fix up the fixtures.
How do you mean?
Because often the stem survives on these fixtures, but it's the glass that's obviously the most delicate part.
Yeah.
And each floor had sort of different combinations of fixtures, so you could tell that the glass had been changed out over the years. And that wasn't necessarily the look we were going for, and also some were just missing.
Right.
So we
Just a
had to
bare
go and source schoolhouse fixtures that would match the heritage. And the hardest one is actually the heritage fixture that went back up in the auditorium itself.
Okay.
And it's a special fixture called an OG fixture
Okay.
that we just found on fluke through Googling on the internet, one of my favorite lighting stores in Portland, and we happened to find almost a perfect match to the original. And it's kind of a heartbreak because we had all the original glass, but it was so fragile that some of them broke just in movement.
Right.
And we didn't feel it could go back up safely.
So is, just to clarify, is the glass new but built like it had been, or
Exactly.
is it old? Okay.
Yeah, it's a very difficult process to create these fixtures. They're cast in molds. So you have to have the molds in order to create the shapes. So some of those fixture shapes are just lost to history because they're just not fabricated anymore.
Okay.
So the idea of these, the front doors, the steps, like the whole outside of the building has been repointed, new granite steps on the exterior. You used to walk out the front doors and there was no landing. The step happened right at the doors.
Yeah.
So it was quite dangerous, right? If you come out after a couple of drinks and you could easily tumble down the stairs. That was all redone. And these doors we could see being used absolutely for exit at the end of a show. There's no reason why people can't spill out the front, but everybody who comes in for a show will be coming in through the lower level and coming up through the building. So it's not like the entrance or the front of the building isn't used anymore. It's just not used as the principal entrance.
Right.
So, but Kate should walk you through this sequence because this is, to me, one of the most dramatic ways that we've tweaked the way you experience the building for functional reasons, but it makes it very dramatic in my mind.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll go through the center because that's probably the most familiar. So this is the new sound and light block that we have entering into the space.
Right.
So we've got this big curved wall that you sort of walk into, and that informs a lot of the space that you'll see once we get inside.
Right.
It's a new shape we introduced, but it's entirely based on what was there. So you can see this back wall, this original wall, was curved.
Okay.
So we're starting to echo that geometry as we come into the space. And this allows you to enter late and not disturb the audience, et cetera, et cetera.
So this is new then?
This is new.
Okay.
The other big thing is this is a fire separation.
Oh, okay.
So this is what allows us to pass the building in modern code, which was quite an interesting endeavor.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah.
Big challenge, yeah.
So these here are actually fire doors, and they separate this portion from the lobby space, which permits safe egress.
Okay. Nice. This is a good place to pause as we're approaching the big attraction of the tour, the Darke Hall Auditorium. When we come back from break, we'll join Marion, Carol, and Lynn just before entering. But as a preview, here's my reaction to seeing the auditorium for the very first time. Oh, wow.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect reaction.
Oh, this is amazing.
I love these floors. I used to wear high heels, and the heels would go click, click, click,
So
click, click on these
this-
wonderful terrazzo
Should I
floors.
keep going or would you like to?
No.
Welcome back to our audio tour of the restored Darke Hall. We're in the main floor foyer, which used to be the main entrance and lobby, and I'm with Lynn Goldman, Carol Gay Bell, and Marianne Woods. Our tour guides are James Yauk and Don Bergstrom. We're about to walk into the Darke Hall Auditorium, Now, Lynn was actually involved in getting the restoration off the ground, so she'd already gone on a tour of the restored building. But for Marianne and Carol, this will be the first time they've seen the auditorium since before the restoration work began.
Do it with you because I've seen it.
I'm going to step up these stairs and take a look. Oh,
my goodness.
it's magnificent.
It's just
Beautiful.
gorgeous. It looks so much bigger.
I know. The most amazing thing to me is that the windows, the stained glass windows, those beautiful windows, had curtains on them for 30 years. Look at them. We didn't even know they were there anymore.
Yeah, it was so dark with
Yeah.
those curtains on there. I do remember those curtains too. And just that area where the pipe organ area is, the pipes. Everything looks so high. It looks higher. It looks
Yes, it does.
taller somehow.
The stage looks so elegant. I don't ever remember it looking that elegant. It's beautiful. And how many people does it accommodate?
474.
And is the balcony still there? Yes. Because it's over my head.
That's right, because the balcony
Okay,
wasn't used for
thank you.
several years.
Well, that's because all the plaster
Everything
started
was-
falling down here. At the beginning of a provincial drama festival, as a matter of fact, the opening night, the plaster started falling down. I phoned the director of physical plant. I said, you have to get over here. The plaster is falling down from the balcony. He said, well, what are you calling me for? So that's when we closed the balcony.
And there just seems to be more leg room. Looks like
Oh, and
there's
look
more
at the
leg room in
seats.
the
Yes,
The
the
seats
seating.
are gorgeous.
The seats are all contemporary sized. You have much more leg room.
Beautiful.
Cup holders. Yeah, it'll be a very comfortable place to come and watch a show.
You know, the old seats, I have to tell you, I got from the Metropolitan Theater when they closed the Met Theater.
Oh, yeah?
The seats before that were so terrible and so old that we were thrilled to get the seats from the Met Theater. And the Met Theater closed how many, 30 years ago, 40 years
At
ago?
least, yeah, at least. Oh, the light.
So there are blackout blinds in front of the windows, and they actually pull up from the bottom. You'll just
Really?
see a little fishing line hanging in the middle of each window.
Oh, sure.
So, and then there's a cassette at the bottom, and that cassette pulls the blind up, and we can black out the room.
What are the emblems in the windows? Do you know?
They are other universities from around the country. So you have University of British Columbia,
I knew it was
the University of
something, but I didn't
Saskatchewan,
remember what.
and I honestly couldn't tell you which each one is. There's one from Sackville, Quebec. I honestly couldn't tell you
it's
which
New
one
Brunswick.
is that New Brunswick is Sackville?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. University of Montreal.
They're beautiful. They're just
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, and those were all taken out and completely restored.
Let's switch here to that technical tour I did with James and Kate Jackson. They'll give us a little more detail about what was involved in restoring the auditorium. Everything from repouring the floor to repainting the trim around the windows with a pattern that had been lost to time and an unfortunate paint job.
So this floor was torn out and repoured. The original floor back at the turn of the century was flat.
Really?
Yeah,
It was like a dance hall.
Really?
yeah. So it
Oh,
was
this is better.
in the raked floor in here used to be all oriented towards the stage. It was orthogonal. So we took that floor out, and Leadcore did a masterful job of repouring this floor so that instead of it being rows of seating that were perpendicular to the stage, everything now follows a curve. So we've taken that curve that Kate was talking about,
Right.
and it extends through all of the seating. And what that means is now if you're sitting in the front row on either of the wings, you're not looking at the exit sign, you actually have an orientation towards the stage. So you don't spend the whole show looking over your left or right shoulder at the stage.
Well, and going back to the entry here, like I said, the geometry just worked. So we just got enough space to get the stairs in and to get a ramp with the correct rise ratio to meet accessibility standards.
Right.
Do you want to talk about the stenciling?
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask about
Sure, we can talk about the stenciling. So that was an interesting archaeological discovery that was made a few years ago by P3A when we were doing investigations in the building. We applied some paint stripper on the windows in order to find the original finishes. Part of this was directed from the fact that in heritage photos we could see that the finishes were very different colors and seemed a lot busier than the sort of beige flat color that we could see.
It was beige. Right. The whole space was beige, if you remember.
So as we stripped it off, we actually found this amazing stenciling was all sitting underneath the paint.
Really?
Now, we weren't able to strip all the paint in order to reveal the original. That wasn't in the cards for this project, but we were able to recreate it. And the stencil was created from an exact copy of what was present underneath the paint.
Really?
And there was actually a student who did the CAD drawings to exactly recreate that full arch shape. And the thing you may not realize is that each stencil is slightly different so that it fits the window perfectly.
Really?
So to create that full shape without any gaps is actually quite a process. And it was really interesting and modern the way that it was finished on site, in that they had a computer-aided cutter cut out the entire pattern on a piece of vinyl.
Yeah, like sticky back almost.
And then it was adhered, and then they painted from there.
Brilliant. So do you guys have any sense of how the stenciling, like if you had to do like a different stencil for each window or multiple different stencils, how it would have been done, whatever it was, 100 and something years ago, the first time that they put the stenciling in?
I think it's just master craftsmen. I mean, if you watch a trained painter paint, they're really artists, and they probably would have measured and done all the adjustments and done it all by hand.
But it wouldn't have been like computers and lasers.
No, it wouldn't be computers and lasers.
Yeah.
The other, all the gold that you see also had been painted over.
Really?
Yeah. So none of the gold had survived.
Yeah.
The ceiling, if you look at that beautiful coffered ceiling, it had disappeared over time. And there were acoustic ceiling tiles, one by one acoustic ceiling tiles with asbestos in it, kind of glued to the underside of the barrels. Because contrary to popular belief, Darke Hall's acoustic qualities were not this unbelievable, it wasn't this unbelievable performance space. I think people's memories tend to, you tell a story that you love.
Yeah.
It was good. It wasn't that it was bad. But what we've done in here now has actually tuned the space and enhanced the acoustic. Like you can tell from my voice in here.
Yeah.
The acoustic qualities have been increased significantly in here.
Yeah.
Both from a control of reverberation, getting it in the right spot, right timing. We had an acoustic engineer did extensive work in here. They came in and they did sound tests, bang tests to see what reverberation times were like. There was a lot of work done to figure out exactly what this was like, and these were world-class guys. And they confirmed it was like, it's not just my opinion that the acoustics weren't that great. It was like we expected it. So how fantastic is it? And it's like, well, it's okay. It was kind of one of those. Oh, okay. Well, what can we do to make it better? Yeah. And that's what's being done. The wainscoting that you see, I think, is one of the a very clever way of introducing the lighting. Yeah. A little bit of wall wash lighting, but it also houses the mechanical system for heating the space.
Okay.
So how do you hide? Like if you look around, you see a duct anywhere? No. Do you see a vent? I mean, it's pretty subtle, but you've got to get air and heat down low, and you've got to get it against the outside walls. So that's what's going on with this wainscoting, and it's only 6 inches wide. Right. And it disappears into the architecture of the space. You would never, if I hadn't told you about it, you probably wouldn't have even realized that.
Well, and the wood pattern you see on the surface of it, that's something that we developed with the acoustic engineers. And it's actually a diffusion pattern to break up the sound along the base here. So you don't get standing echoes and things like that.
Really? So it's performing all these different tasks. All the plaster in here was restored. It's all original. Labor of love. The pipes on either side of the stage they were never anything more than decoration. There's no organ that used these pipes. Some of the pipes were damaged. They were very delicate. Some had already been damaged. So some of them, they've all been repainted. They've all been refurbished. Some of them needed extensive repair work to bring them up to a point where the dents were taken out of them and things like that. And again, the contractor and the sub-trades it's astounding. I mean, they did not look like that. That's how they looked originally. They're absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful.
I guess the other big piece that will be really important to certain groups in Regina is the new thrust that we put onto the stage.
What does that mean?
So we extended the stage out 8 feet into the auditorium in order to accommodate a thrust. Because prior to that, there had always been a temporary stage extension put in front of the stage in Darke Hall. So we created a thrust that's sympathetic to the architecture, so it will always blend into the space.
And it's hard to see, but it actually has a curve to it as it comes out. And so now the performers are forward of the arch, whereas originally the arch was sort of the front of the stage. From an acoustic perspective, that's not spectacular. And from a depth of stage, it was actually a very shallow stage, which limited what types of performances could be held here. So when you start to introduce the orchestra, the symphony orchestra or something like that, and not the full orchestra obviously, but they need more depth. So more depth of stage, and we were able to accommodate that by repouring that slab and reconfiguring the seats. Again, it introduces the curve again, and you have the same sort of archway to the top of the proscenium.
And now, let's step out onto the stage with Carol, Marianne, and Lynn.
Beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Well, let's go stand on the stage, and then we can go up to the balcony, and you can reminisce about what it was like to be on stage.
And we used to have, when we did our high school musical here in 1973, we had an orchestra in the front.
Yeah.
And that's where the orchestra was.
Yeah, when we did little theater musicals, the orchestra was always
And
there.
sometimes for lyric, we would have the orchestra behind the actors and Hello Dolly.
But sometimes we used to have them down here.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. We marveled at the fact that, because we didn't have any wing space at all, the fact that we had this much wing space.
This stage is just marvelous. Look at it.
It's huge, doesn't it?
It's huge. Hello out there. Oh my. It's a thrill standing here looking out. We did a lot of musicals here as well as...
We did Rogers and Hart, a musical celebration we did here in
And I directed that.
You directed that in 1979.
Introducing Rory Osterhaus, who became Rory Allen.
Exactly, yeah.
That was a great show, but I love Rogers. Rogers and Hart, they're pretty neat.
And all the lights are LED.
Oh, yes.
So they're never going to burn out, right?
Correct.
They're
That's
going to
what they
last
tell me.
longer than you, Lynn. Maybe. It would be lovely. We should reprise something to...
Well,
so the stage is accessible as well. And you talk about having stairs at the front. There was, if you could imagine if the university or anybody else was hosting an event here, and you're going to give somebody an award, and that person is in a wheelchair, there was no way to get that person from the seating area onto the stage previously. You literally would have had to have lifted them up a set of stairs to get them here. So
We used to have stairs that ran down the front, too, for those
Yeah.
occasions,
Yeah.
because the Conservatory of Music awards night and everything, they had stairs in the front.
So now there's a wheelchair lift that is back in the corner here that has been added so that you can, as I said, every floor in the building is now accessible to, well, there's actually one in the back here that's not, but every space where you could possibly have the public is accessible The back of house allows you to accommodate performers with any physical disability.
That is true. That's really
Yeah,
terrific.
and we'll show you that in the
That,
washrooms.
I should tell you, is thanks to Jean Freeman, who was the first one when we went to the president to talk about the buildings and having them redone. Jeannie was the one who kept insisting that they have to have accessible space because her husband was in a wheelchair for years and she couldn't bring him in, you know? So I just wanted to tell you that.
To be included is
Yeah.
really special, yes.
You're listening to Out of the Dark, a series about Regina's historic performance space, Darke Hall, on 91.3 FM CJTR, tuned into the community. We're going to move to the balcony with James and Kate to learn a bit about how the new mechanical systems were installed. Oh, wow.
So the big thing in here is you don't hear a mechanical system rattling.
Okay.
And that was a big job.
That was big.
And
Well, where is the mechanical system?
so the mechanical system sits behind the stage. So the stage box is there. There's a big box of a unit you can see just past there.
Okay.
So that's the air handling unit for this entire building.
Right.
It's actually sitting on the addition that Cliff Weens did
Correct.
on the back because
Okay.
it had a lower roof and what was a flat roof. So this is one of those instances where you sort of take a look at what's there and it's, you know what, we can do something that is a little bit intrusive to the 1960s edition. We can deal with it as best we can aesthetically, but the trade-off is you get a clean space inside the auditorium.
Right.
So this is where you're doing that balancing and you're making those decisions.
Well, again, it was Darke Hall is such a tiny space. There's nowhere to put things. So you get very limited in your decisions. So you have to be as creative as you can be. And feeding from that space throughout this entire building was a challenge, especially because a lot of the space was never fed with an air system. It was radiant only.
Right.
So you've got big, bulky air ducts that you have to get through a whole beautiful building, and you can't show anything. And they never had those services before, so they didn't build spaces for them.
100 years ago, if you needed ventilation, you open the front doors.
Right. Right. Of course.
So this attic space is now packed, absolutely packed with vents,
Okay.
in order to bring air from that big unit all the way across and then down through the heritage areas in the front. And then each one of these drop plaques that you see here, that is the supply air for the space.
Nice. People talk about like what they did during COVID. And so there's a lot of talk about like, you know, Tiger King and their sourdough. Mm-hmm. You guys did Darke Hall.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually. This, in many respects, the ability for the contractor to go, well, I shouldn't say go slow because, you know, time is money, but to take their time where time was well spent, right? And for the university to sort of make good decisions about the project. And it's certainly the execution, the construction execution of it definitely slowed down. But because of COVID, there was no pressure to open for this date for this act that had been booked. So if something did come late, you know, if we can't get the drapery for, you know, it's 3 months late, it doesn't affect anything. If the stage flooring doesn't go in right away, it doesn't affect anything.
Well, and it gave us time for some of the more difficult pieces, and some of that was the faux painting, which isn't as common nowadays, obviously. And we had an excellent painter, but it still took many iterations to get on the same page about what it should look like in order to recreate what was there previously.
Right, right.
And we're both sort of looking at each other, and I'm like, well, I've never done faux painting either, but I know it's not that.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that?
Like the trim, the stenciling, and the
So these
the
arches
gold
you see here, that is a variety of washes on top of a base layer in gold paint. And getting that particular finish and patina, which would have been close to what was originally there, was a process to learn how to do it again.
Yeah. Right. As you can see, it's not just a flat gold paint. It has life to it. It has a little bit of sparkle. It's got areas that are darker and areas that are lighter. So it's because when she says full painting, it's because it's not gold leaf. It's made to look like it's been gold leaf, right? So it's full.
Well, and the antiquing of all the medallions that you see on the front of the balcony, and all just those little sensitive pieces, and you want to respect the heritage as much as possible, but clean them up.
Painter did a great job.
Yeah.
So the money in the project was very much spent on what you can see in front of us, and it was spent on the mechanical and electrical systems to make all of this possible.
And we're going to wind down the tour with Lynn, Marianne, and Carol as James and Dawn tour us through the new lounge behind the balcony. This was a room that used to be the office of renowned violinist and music teacher Howard Layton Brown. From there, they take us out onto the balcony, where the tour comes to an end. Yeah.
There's the elevator again.
And what's this here?
That is the balcony lounge.
But it doesn't have a bar up here.
There's a portable bar that can be brought up.
Ah, you think, and I don't hardly drink, so that's what I'm asking all the time.
Oh, this is
I was just being funny when I said there's no bar up here.
But there will be.
I haven't been up here for years. Gosh.
No, there'll be a portable bar set up when they have an event going on.
Right.
Yeah. Well, trust me, I don't want to have to carry a drink around either. So at intermission, people that are sitting in the balcony have an opportunity to, well, anybody I suppose would possibly have the chance to come up here. This used to be Professor Layton Brown.
Howard Layton Brown's office.
Oh, yeah.
So we've taken a room that used to be a private office and now it becomes a public space for everybody using the
He'd
building.
be really angry. He would be not like losing his office.
Well, and you can see
He
why.
loved his office.
Did he?
It was the best office on the entire campus, I'm sure.
Yes, Howard loved the building, loved his office.
And are there music studios still?
No.
No.
Is the tunnel still here?
No, the tunnel is gone.
Oh, my son was a film major and he made one of his first films in this tunnel. So Lynn, what do you think?
Well, I'm just looking at the front row. That's where I sat with Jan Pierce one night, the opera singer, when he was here. And we watched the symphony, the Regina Symphony play, and he made funny comments all through it. I was 16, 17 years old, something. I love it. It's wonderful.
So many
It feels
unique
really good.
features, like, you know, keeping the pipes and all of this beautiful, beautiful gold. And, oh, I mean, it's like no other theater that I've seen. I'm sure that there are other theaters around, but
Not in this province.
it's
not like this.
it's like no other theater. It's very different and very unique, and
It's just a gem.
I'm sure it will be so well received. But do a little act up there for us, will you?
I think I still have Shine on Saskatchewan.
Do you?
Some of it.
Okay, well, you and I will do it later.
I'm going to grab my coat and take off. I've got another meeting. But I
Thank you
think
very
there's-
Yeah,
much for
thank
being
you
our
so
tour
much.
guide. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Really.
you
I told you all I know.
you can be very proud of what
Yeah,
this theater looks like. Yeah.
The project architect wasn't able to be here. That's Kate Jackson. And Angela Bernard did a lot of work on this project. Architecture is a team sport. There are a lot of people that touch these. There's probably from our office, there were at least 5 or 6 people that really invested 2 or 3 years of their lives and poured it into this. We had the assistance of Donald Luxton, a heritage architect from Vancouver, helped us with it. And it's a labor of love, this project. And the university really deserves kudos. I mean, Vianne Timmins will always be a hero of mine for finally getting College Avenue campus restored. It's remarkable, and this project will now live on for another 100 years. in the state, and it'll serve the community really, really well.
Well, you should
Yeah,
be very proud of
yeah.
yourself, Eric, because really,
And
you
please
hung in there despite all the controversy and everything else, and you helped make it happen. That's very important.
And take our comments and congratulations back to the people that worked
I
on
sure
it,
will.
said that we
Please
were
do.
really
Yeah.
impressed.
Yeah,
and
I sure will.
I hope that even at our stage of life that we maybe get a chance to do something on this stage. It would be really wonderful.
Wouldn't it? Maybe a benefit.
We can reprise Auntie
Benefit
Mame.
for the community with all the art, with all the organizations that have been a part of this building over the years.
Well, you know, Regina Little Theatre is as old as Darke Hall, because it must be coming up to, it's over 90 years old now. And it's the oldest continuously running community theatre in the country. I think Ottawa Little Theatre is a little bit older, but it closed during the war, so we were the only ones who stayed open. So I hope Regina Little Theatre is going to be on this stage again, because that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I'd like to see Lyric on this stage too again. Because we did so many productions here.
Well, maybe the Lions Band will come back.
It's a treasure. We now have a treasure, and we should fill it with jewels.
Yeah, and you know, having this is going to be a real benefit to us as a flyover province. It's, no, seriously, if you've got a place where they can perform that's noted for acoustics and for, it's, yeah.
Can I get some final thoughts?
I don't have any.
Yeah.
What? It's wonderful to see it. I'm grateful that it happened. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very proud of the university that they hung in there and did this for themselves, because I've always thought of Darke Hall and the college building as being the face of the university to the citizens of Regina. And now it's a beautiful face, so we can be proud of it.
And I can't think of any other two people that I would rather be here with to see this facility than you, Carol, and you, Lynn, because I did my first little theater show with Lynn in Plaza Suite, and then Carol and Lynn and I did Auntie Mame a few years later, and it's just, I was just excited about this.
And I did my last show with you when we did Calendar Girls.
Yes, yeah,
That was the last play.
Regina Little Theatre,
I
yeah.
say it was my perfect closing act, because I had 2 scenes, 8 lines, and I didn't have to take off my clothes.
Not like the rest of us.
Ladies, it was such a pleasure to reminisce with you, and you have so many things like programs and write-ups, and I'm going to go home now and look through all my boxes and see what I can find. But I just want to say that how fortunate we are. How fortunate we are, and to all the people who are responsible for this wonderful, wonderful theater. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
This concludes our audio tour of Darke Hall, and with it, the Out of the Dark series. Thanks to everyone I've spoken to over the course of these 8 episodes. Kirby Werchenko, Kenton DeYoung, Dan Carr, Bob Mossing, Edward Willett, Susan McDonald, Sherry Torgrimson, Hannah Ellich, Jamie Krauser, David McIntyre, Dr. Roberta McKay, Elmer Brenner, Michelle Ellingson Aylesby, Adam Aylesby, Hawksley Workman, Don Bergstrom, Kate Jackson, James Yauk, and of course, Carol Gay Bell, Lynn Goldman, and Marianne Woods. It has been an honor to get to know all of your stories. Thanks also to Christian Robinson, Hang On Ho, Jonathan Ward, and Simon Fryer for their performance of the music we've been using for Out of the Dark. That being Mozart's Dissonance Quartet K465. And of course, this series was made possible thanks to the generous support of Sask Arts and the University of Regina Conservatory of Performing Arts. And I'd like to add on to that an enormous thank you to Erica Folnovich from the Conservatory for all of her support. The Out of the Dark project was entirely her idea and would not have happened without her work and inspiration. Darke Hall is situated in Treaty 4 territory, the traditional home of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis-Métis Nation. I have been your host, Paul Deshane. Thank you so much for listening.